This is the first of a long series of readings that I will do covering John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. I'll be reading the Henry Beveridge translated edition, and I'm going to be starting with the Prefatory Address from Calvin to Francis, King of the French. So, Prefatory Address to His Most Christian Majesty, the most high and mighty and illustrious monarch, Francis, King of the French, his sovereign, John Calvin, prays, peace, and salvation in Christ. Sire, when I first engaged in this work, nothing was farther from my thoughts than to write what should afterwards be presented to your Majesty. My intention was only to furnish a kind of rudiments by which those who feel some interest in religion might be trained to true godliness. And I toiled at the task chiefly for the sake of my countrymen, the French, multitudes of whom I perceived to be hungering and thirsting after Christ, while very few seem to have been duly imbued with even a slender knowledge of him. That this was the object which I had in view is apparent from the work itself, which is written in a simple and elementary form adapted for instruction. But when I perceived that the fury of certain bad men had risen to such a height in your realm that there was no place in it for sound doctrine, I thought it might be of service if I were in the same work both to give instruction to my countrymen and also to lay before your Majesty a confession, from which you may learn what the doctrine is that so inflames the rage of those madmen who are this day with fire and sword troubling your kingdom. For I fear not to declare that what I have here given may be regarded as a summary of the very doctrine which they vociferate, ought to be punished with confiscation, exile, imprisonment, and flames, as well as exterminated by land and sea. I am aware, indeed, how, in order to render our cause as hateful to your Majesty as possible, they have filled your ears and mind with atrocious insinuations, but you will be pleased of your clemency to reflect that neither in word nor deed could there be any innocence were it sufficient merely to accuse. When any one, with the view of exciting prejudice, observes that this doctrine, of which I am endeavoring to give your Majesty an account, has been condemned by the suffrages of all the estates, and was long ago stabbed again and again by partial sentences of courts of law, he undoubtedly says nothing more than that it has sometimes been violently oppressed by the power and faction of adversaries, and sometimes fraudulently and insidiously overwhelmed by lies, cavils, and calumny. While a cause is unheard, it is violence to pass sanguinary sentences against it. It is fraud to charge it, contrary to its deserts, with sedition and mischief. That no one may suppose we are unjust in thus complaining, you yourself, most illustrious sovereign, can bear us witness with what lying calumnies it is daily traduced in your presence, as aiming at nothing else than to wrest the scepters of kings out of their hands, to overturn all tribunals and seats of justice, to subvert all order and government, to disturb the peace and quiet of society, to abolish all laws, destroy the distinctions of rank and poverty, and, in short, turn all things upside down. And yet, that which you hear is but the smallest portion of what is said. For among the common people are disseminated certain horrible insinuations which, if well founded, would justify the whole world in condemning the doctrine with its authors to 1,000 fires and gibbets. Who can wonder that the popular hatred is inflamed against it, when credit is given to those most inquisitous accusations? See why all ranks unite with one accord in condemning our persons and our doctrine. Carried away by this feeling, those who sit in judgment merely give utterance to the prejudices which they have imbibed at home, and think they have duly performed their part if they do not order punishment to be inflicted on any one until convicted, either on his own confession or on legal evidence. But of what crime convicted? Of that condemned doctrine, is the answer. But with what justice condemned? The very essence of the defense was not to abjure the doctrine itself, but to maintain its truth. On this subject, however, not a whisper is allowed. Justice, then, most invincible sovereign, entitles me to demand that you will undertake a thorough investigation of this cause, which has hitherto been tossed about in any kind of way and handled in the most irregular manner, without any order of law, and with passionate heat, rather than judicial gravity. Let it not be imagined that I am here framing my own private defense with a view of obtaining a safe return to my native land. Though I cherish towards it the feelings which are become me as a man, still, as matters now are, I can be absent from it, without regret. The cause which I plead is the common cause of all the godly, and therefore the very cause of Christ, a cause which throughout your realm now lies, as it were, in despair, torn and trampled upon in all kinds of ways, and that more through the tyranny of certain Pharisees than any sanction from yourself. But it matters not to inquire how the thing is done. The fact that it is done cannot be denied. For so far have the wicked prevailed, that the truth of Christ, if not utterly routed and dispersed, lurks as if it were ignobly buried, while the poor church, either wasted by cruel slaughter, or driven into exile, or intimidated and terror-struck, scarcely ventures to breathe. Still her enemies press on with their wonted rage and fury over the ruins which they have made, strenuously assaulting the wall, which is already giving way. Meanwhile, no man comes forth to offer his protection against such furies. Any who would be thought most favorable to the truth merely talk of pardoning the error and imprudence of ignorant men, for so those modest personages speak, giving the name of error and imprudence to that which they know to be the infallible truth of God, and of ignorant men to those whose intellect they see that Christ has not despised, seeing he has designed to entrust them with the mysteries of his heavenly wisdom. Thus all are ashamed of the gospel.